hours times 45 years times the minutes, and I figured it would take me 23,652,000 minutes to give my speech tonight. But I got to do it in 45 minutes. I've been fortunate enough to go out and talk to a lot of school groups at all levels: college, high school, grade schools, particularly in the Boulder, Denver area. And when I go into the fourth grade classes, which often have 3 classes combined, at the end of my talks I bring in a sample of ore from the Caribou mine or cross mine, and I give each student a sample. It's a small sample, perhaps this size. And I'm demolding all my equipment, going back to my truck at lunchtime, and a little third grader comes up to me and he goes, Mr. Miner, Mr. Miner, can you tell me how much this gold ore sample's worth? And I'll say, well, let's figure it out. So I took out a balance and we weighed it. It weighed 1/4 pound. And I said, there's a 1/2 ounce of gold per ton in that sample and 8 ounces of silver per ton. And you've just got 1/4 pound here. Today gold prices are $1,200, silver's at 18. I said, that sample's worth a penny. And he goes, shucks, I just paid that fourth grader $1 for that sample. And that's how I thought, that's sort of what the gold industry is like sometimes. I hope tonight that in this short time, I can tell you some things that I've learned the hard way. I started out mining in high school in Colorado Springs for Golden Cycle. My first job was at the Ajax mine, and we were keeping that 3,100-foot shaft open, the hoist running, and the Carlton Tunnel draining water out of the Cripple Creek district. The Ajax mine went back into use a little bit in 1977 through 83, and it has not been affected by the pit mining down there yet. But Cripple Creek was the first district. My dad operated Colorado Lime Company, so at age 11 I was working up the quarry above Colorado Springs, a scar on the mountain. And at age 14 I was running the crushing plant and helping with drilling and blasting. And we could see the Colorado Division of Mines coming up in their white trucks, and the guys would grab me and hide me while the Division of Mines director was there. But my father operated limestone mines in Colorado Springs up until 1980. When I went to Boulder to school, I worked in 6 different mines. One of them was the andesite rock quarry just west of Lyons, and it kept me out of the Vietnam War actually, because we were making andesite high quality rock for the Burlington Northern Railroad. And at that time the military had a lottery system, and I was working and trying to go through theology school at CU, and I got behind 1 semester. So I went from 2S to 1A, and they called me in for the draft, and I looked at this sergeant and I said, sir, I feel like I'm doing more for my country mining andesite rock for the railroad than going and fighting people I don't know. And he said, well, and a month later the lottery happened and I got number 250 or something, so I didn't have to go to it. But right after that I worked in an underground tungsten mine outside of Ward, Colorado, where we were following a scheelite vein that was about this wide, and we drove a 300-foot tunnel on it. So I would drill this side and shoot it, muck the waste out, and then slab the scheelite ore off. And the way we identified that was with a fluorescent light. And that lasted until I went to Caribou in 1971. I started out Caribou with a pick and shovel operation. My first partner was Columbine Glass Company, which makes all the bottles for Coors beer at the time. And Jack LaFollette had Union Supply Company and knew the Caribou mine well by supplying them with mine supplies in the 1950s. So we became partners, and I had full reign at Columbine Glass Company. They had a beautiful machine shop, and I got to take all their scrap steel. In fact, the head frame that I built underground at the cross mine all came from scrap steel from Columbine Glass Company. Jack was involved with the Henrietta mine over in Silverton and the Howardsville mill, and he put about $6 million into that project. And there was a breccia pipe supposedly coming down at the Henrietta mine, And rather than drill a few inexpensive core holes in to hit this, he had an Atlas Copco mini facer machine that cost millions of dollars to pull up there, and it was only a meter and a half in diameter, and he was going to bore this hole in and hit this supposed rich silver pipe. The machine got stuck. It was a multi-million-dollar failure, and we just decided to buy him out. The problem for me over the years is I had a 15% NSR royalty on the cross mine, and though I reopened the mine, put it in production, the owners would not sell us a royalty. And everywhere I went, whether it was majors or juniors or international finding people, they would not put the money up to develop the mine properly until we got rid of the royalty. So we finally shut the production off in 1986, went to core drilling. That's right, Mr. Thomas. Oh, and I forgot, of course, some of you met my wife, Sarah, and our little baby. The little miner there was born at our house right below the mine 18 months ago. And I lug him up to the mine all the time in a little baby wrap thing. And he does water quality work with me, and he's ridden in our loader, and so he's getting a very early beginning at the mines. But,
he's got a good future too, Tom.
Yeah. The next partner was a wonderful partner, Ken Good. He owned the Denver Tech Center, and I had 55 people working for me in 1980. And we were running the Boulder Mill around the clock, and we were reopening the Caribou mine. And then he made a run on Tosco, the oil shale company, and Exxon was going to do the Colony Oil Shale project, and he bought their stock at $37 a share. He bought another 40 million of it on margin, and we all woke up one day and said Exxon pulls out a Colony Oil Shale project, and the stock went to $5 and he was bankrupt. So I had to lay off a lot of my employees. We bought him out. Then I got involved with an Australian company, and we started core drilling, and they were heavily involved in a lead zinc mine in New Brunswick, Canada, called the Caribou, of all things. And Larry Barrett came into the picture with us. He was with Kennecott, Anaconda. He worked for me for 4 years as our head geologist. We started core drilling both at the Cross Mine and around the district. The Australians took down a $45 million loan from Westpac Bank on the Caribou lead zinc mine in New Brunswick, and they failed on it. The whole project failed, and they had to leave, and so we bought them out. All of my partners, except for one, left the project because they failed on something else. But meanwhile, every time we did something, we kept acquiring more property, consolidating the district, adding more to the mines, being in production, core drilling, building this district to where today we have 550 acres of patented ground, just under 2,000 acres of unpatented ground. We have 3 modern surface plants. We've done thousands of feet of underground mine development and 176,000 feet of drilling. One thing we're finding at Caribou and working with some of the top geologists like Larry Barrett and then Bob Ackroyd, I noticed on Common Ground that the Homestake property, the McLaughlin mine, was featured in that movie. He was the senior geologist at the McLaughlin mine. Then he went on with Newmont to work with Carlin. He worked for us for 9 years and did some impeccable work on the geology of Caribou. Another thing that we've utilized heavily is the Vulcan MapTech program right down here on Union. MapTech has been a huge asset for us. We've dumped all the mine workings, the aerial contour surveys, the aerodat work, geophysical work, all of the core drilling, all of the faults, the structures, everything into that program. So we can go down there and say, it takes about an hour to start really beaming everything up. But when you do that, you start seeing a picture of Caribou that's awfully exciting. I often walk out of there feeling I'm not touching the ground, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Now, why is this deposit so interesting? It's a mesothermal deposit. It's a low to medium temperature. It has all the characteristics of districts like the Coeur d'Alenes in Idaho. The Lucky Friday mine is a good example of that. And the deeper we drill, the more interesting the mineralogy gets. We've drilled some holes down 2,700 feet now. The one thing that's changing is we're seeing a lessening of the silver and the increasing of the gold. Structurally, what makes this district interesting is that we have these strike slip faults that are northeast, southwest, and they're great big faults that run for well over 10,000 feet in strike length. There's dilations in these faults, and in between the strike slip faults are another number of ladder veins. So when I first started at the Cross Mine in 1971, we had two principal veins, the Cross, the Crown Point, and they had just touched the rare metals vein in 1939 before the War Closure Act. Today we've identified 106 veins, stockworks, breccia pipe, and we're finding out by drilling that these zones go for thousands of feet on strike, and we have seen no let up in depth on these veins. The Cross Mine is 200 feet deep below our working level. The Caribou Mine is 1,200 feet deep. The Caribou Mine produced 20 million ounces of silver, and we don't know how much gold. We assume about 300,000 ounces in history. What's intriguing about it is that in the late 1940s, the Atomic Energy Commission was scanning the Front Range of Colorado looking for pitchblende. And on the Caribou dump, they found a trace of pitchblende mixed in with some very high galena silver ore. And the Atomic Energy Commission came in and funded driving the Idaho Tunnel, which is right next to the Cross Mine, in 4,000 feet and hitting the old Caribou shaft at the 500 level. They dewatered down to the 1040 level, and Don Nelson, who was executive president on Sears and Roebuck, was also head of the War Board for the United States government during World War II. And so they started core drilling, and they were hitting a bunch of new silver veins, but they did find one shoot of pitchblende that was so exciting that Look magazine published a front page article that the United States has found its source for its atomic bomb program. Well, it turned out to be nothing. There was a total of 7 tons of pitchblende ore mined, but the silver grades in that pitchblende were running in the thousands of ounces per ton. Well, those Caribou people decided to sell the mine to an industrialist from New York City, George Horvath, and he deepened the shaft from the 1040 down to the 1230 and opened up the no-name vein, and they named the new veins after Don Nelson. So you have the East Nelson Intermediate and West Nelson. And they opened up some fabulously rich ore on the 1,230 foot level. In the center of the no-name vein on the 1230 is a seam of ruby silver. And Mr. Horvath in New York caught wind that they were high grading and stealing ore from him, and he ordered the pump shut off in 1956. I met him in 1971. I made 14 trips to New York City to negotiate a deal on the Caribou, and we bought it, lost it 3 times, and it wasn't until his death and his secretaries of really long years inherited it that we bought the Caribou mine from him in 1997. An interesting story about Mr. Horvath, and I could talk for hours about him. One of my first visits, we were having dinner at the Oak Room at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. I was 25 years old, and I noticed that he had a bone-handled pistol in his suit. And I said, George, why are you carrying a gun? And he pulled out a badge and he said, I've been deputized in Dade County, Florida, and I have a license to carry this gun. And I said, well, why are you carrying it? And he said, well, I don't know if you noticed, but I have a bulletproof limousine that brings me to work every day. The windows in my office on West 57th Street are bulletproof. I have multiple locks. I said, why? He said, well, in 1967, I borrowed $28 million from the Teamsters Union Pension Fund to buy the Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas. And I defaulted on the whole $28 million. And Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters Union turned against me. Then I turned against them and I informed the federal government, the FBI, about their activities. And so they put a marker on my head. And I said, well, whatever happened to Jimmy Hoffa? And he said, I was very much a part of making sure that he had a concrete block with chains around it, and we dumped him in Lake Michigan. And I never knew if that was true, and I've always wanted to follow up on that,
Tom,
but
it's
that
not
was
true.
in
I dug
1974.
basements in Detroit. I found him.
Throughout this career of building at Caribou, I've had year after year, things happen to me like that. It's been phenomenal. But most important is sticking with this district, still working 7 days a week on it, and having incredible highs and lows, whether it's dealing with severe weather, partnerships, financing, or the great times when we were in production and producing gold and silver ore. We actually operated the Belmont Mill in Boulder, which was the old Allied Chemical Mill, and we ran it from 1976 until 1990. We tried to buy that mill multiple times, but the owner wouldn't sell to us. But it was a fabulous mill for milling the Caribou ores. And we would mill 25 tons of ore to make a ton of concentrate. And we shipped most of our concentrates to Cominco up at Trail, BC, and to Sarco down in El Paso and East Helena. I brought a few pictures to show you. Hopefully they're not all upside down. Yeah. The Colorado Division of Wildlife introduced 75 moose to North Park about 25 years ago. They have proliferated unbelievably, and they've come over from North Park to Grand Park, and they've come over the Caribou Pass, and they're showing up at Caribou now. Well, I came up to do water quality work one Sunday last fall, and this big bull moose was in our water pond. My dog went over and put his nose up to the moose. I got a picture, and all of a sudden that bull moose leaped that fence and came after the dog and after me, and we ran in the building, and I kept peeking out, so I grabbed the dog and we jumped in the truck, and the bull moose came right at the truck like that. And we've had a couple of pretty interesting moose encounters. In the early days at Caribou, the district was found by Sam Conger in 1864. It took him until 1869 to learn what he had discovered. And pretty soon thereafter, there was a big silver rush. This is typical of the hoist, the steam hoist that they had at the Caribou mine. What's interesting about this is the cable for that hoist is a rope cable. These are a little bit out of order, but during our production years, we loaded the ore in tandem dump trucks and shipped it down to Boulder. That's a picture of the cross mine, actually what it looks like today. And us core drilling in the lower picture. We've done 176,000 feet of core drilling. That was a long year 44 drill that we used, but I can tell you from experience that we found that having top drill contractors in was far cheaper than drilling ourselves, particularly with the long year unit, because when we needed a part for that, they had to manufacture it. They didn't have it on shelf. And that was a conventional core drill. However, we were able to drill some very deep holes with that particular unit. Here's Murray Watts drilling. Murray Watts is a graduate of the Colorado School of Mines and a very well-renowned core driller, and he's done an awful lot of drilling for us over the years. MSHA, in a minute we're going to look at and address the MSHA issues, but that's one of our many maps that we have to post on the surface and underground for ventilation and escape at the cross mine. This is perhaps the best drilling company I ever had at Caribou. It's Idea Drilling out of Hibbing, Minnesota. That was a QS1000 electric or a hydraulic drill, and they never had one breakdown in the entire drilling program for us. It was a very quiet rig. They got excellent recovery, and that's down in the Caribou bog area. This is looking down at the bog area, about 1,800 feet from Caribou Hill, and the no-name vein is dipping into the bog, striking like this, and we drilled 5 holes in the no-name vein, and hole 104 and 97. we hit the no-name vein at 1,341 feet down, perpendicular, and went out of it at 1,401 feet. And it was 60 feet wide, and some of the most beautiful mineralization that I've ever seen in Caribou. That's 1,800 feet away from where it was last mined. Traditionally, we dumped the ore, and in the winter months, we had to load it into dump trucks and get it down to the mill because it would freeze very rapidly. We're working with Harrison Western Corporation right now over on Quail Street. This was a proposed shaft we were going to do in 1988. Our deepest level is the 4th level, and we're proposing to sink a new vertical shaft at the cross mine to develop not only the existing veins form that we have here, but the new Apache system and this Anaconda system that's striking northeast, southwest, and dipping into the cross mine. What we're saying is a big trunk zone here, and every 100 feet we go down here, when we build our new 200-ton-a-day mill, every 100 feet we go below the 4th level, it keeps that mill running for 2 years. And I would hope that we would see that go down eventually 8,000 or 9,000 feet. It won't be in my lifetime. But this was the first mine I worked at in Victor, Colorado. It's the ACAX mine. And that's a modern head frame that might be what you'll see at the cross mine even as early as this year, we're hoping. Modern hoist, different than the rope hoist. I was at the SME convention in Denver and met with Lakeshore and Hepburn, and you can see what MSHA is requiring now for hydraulic brakes on hoist and all the bells and whistles, but this is a single drum hoist that if you're hoisting ore every day, you have to have something that's safe, efficient, and engineered to today's technology. One of the reasons that I've had trouble hearing is I've drilled about 85,000 holes with the jackleg drill, and they run at 120 decibels in a quiet area. In the early days, we didn't have the hearing protection we have today. The new mine that we have, I envision, will have electric hydraulic drill jumbos that are very quiet. You can actually pop a disc in there and you can pre-program your hole pattern. And the reason for this is they make these very tiny, as you guys know, or big ones, but for narrow vein mining, one person can bring this over and drill a heading in under an hour, pull over and drill another heading, another heading, another heading. Where a jackleg drill, you're drilling for 2 or 3 hours. And this increases your efficiency incredibly. When you guys come up to the mine, we're gonna do a little bit of safety thing, but we're gonna go in the portal here, look at the underground hoist room, the original 1870 cross vein, crown point, escapeway, Juliet stockwork, and then we're gonna go out and look at the 4 brand new veins that we've opened up, all the Apache systems. Somebody said, Tom, what's the greatest thrill you have mining? It's right here, because this is the Apache vein. You can see the mineralization. It's when you go in and drill around, and in this case it was 26 holes, and you load it, you demob your hoses, your drill. In fact, a few years ago I drove a 150-foot tunnel at age 65 with a jackleg, and I got really upset because my young miners would come by and start rolling up my hoses, and they said, we'll carry your drill for you. I said, if you don't carry that drill, I'm gonna fire you, because that's the thrill of mining, is setting up your equipment, drilling around, demobbing your equipment, loading your powder, hooking in your non-electrics, and lighting your fuse, and walk out about 600 feet and you ventilate, and you come back an hour later with a hose and a scaling bar. And I'll tell you from experience that gold veins anywhere, but particularly here, say you cut a channel sample here and don't even look at what you're sampling, and send it off to ALS Chemex, that's who we use as an assaying firm. All right, you're gonna get a value of gold, silver, lead, zinc, copper, or however you want to sample it. But I can assure you that you go in 1 inch past where you just sampled, it can be very different. And when you core drill, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, you're drilling, we drill most of our holes NQ diameter, just under 2 inches. and you hit a major vein, or you hit a vein you know about, or you're doing infill drilling, you get a 2-inch sample back. So you get 10 feet that runs half ounce in that 2 inches. You're talking about a vein that goes down thousands of feet and strikes for thousands of feet. Could be 5 feet wide or 50 feet wide. What does it run 2 inches over from this, or a foot over? And that's part of the magic of gold mining. We hit down in the peat bog in an area that nobody's ever prospected or whatever. We hit a calcite breccia pipe that's 55 feet wide. It's pure white calcite. And in that, we had 1 foot that ran 6 ounces of gold per ton, 1,100 feet below the surface. We had one interval in there that ran 800 ounces of silver per ton. That's pretty darn exciting. That's what the core looks like right here. But what's a foot away from that, or 100 feet above it, or 200 feet below it? And that's what makes this precious metal mining so exciting. But that for me is one of my greatest excitements, is going around, shooting it, coming back in and seeing what the mud pile looks like. Pretty darn exciting. That's when I first started the cross mine with an Onco 12B mucker and a little 3/4 ton car. Actually, that's the car that Cadre helped me push muck with. So there's the early days in the early 70s. I had a little Sears building and a building to cover our air compressor, and that's what the cross mine looks like today. Rich asked me, he said, "Tom, is there a better way to put a shaft down than sinking conventionally?" I said, "Yeah, there is, because the technology's there. You guys are aware of this. This is a blind shaft bore from the surface down. And what happens if you cut a shaft in hard rock like we have, with one of those, the integrity of the rock's better, it's clean, you can hang your steel sets, and the thing is that in this one, as it's cutting, it's putting the 3/4 inch cuttings inside this, and they're coming back up in a stream of water. But there is something to that, and I threw that in for Rich. That's typical of the rounds that we drill in the mine. The key to these rounds is drilling a burn hole with a large diameter center hole you don't shoot, hitting these with instantaneous zeros, 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and then around, and then drilling these down on an angle so that you're shooting your muck back on your rail or whatever you're mucking from. That's a very typical round that we would drill. That was 2 weeks ago at the cross mine. Dealing with wicked weather with old equipment is just another challenge for me. Water quality, the way we meet our NPDES permit and with the state of Colorado, which is one of the toughest permits we have, is 7 days a week putting lime in our ponds, even though our water is very alkaline, and raising the pH up to just below 9. And then we have a secondary big settlement pond that, oh, and by the way, to operate the water discharge system in Colorado now, you have to be licensed. We're a Class D operation, so you have to be licensed by the state of Colorado, which means you have to take a test every 5 years and pass it to get a license to operate the system that you actually build. One of the many things we do, apart from bi-monthly grab samples that we bring over to SGS labs over here in Wheat Ridge, is the whole toxicity testing. So every quarter, and I'll do that again the end of this month, we have to take 2 1-gallon samples of our effluent, take them into Seacrest labs in Louisville, and they put flathead minnows and invertebrate water fleas in our water, and they have to live so many hours. You do that on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you have a mortality rate that exceeds what the state allows, then you have to go to further testing, and you have to identify the toxin. So we do this every quarter. It costs $1,650 for the samples to run, apart from my time. But it's, and then the reporting, oh, by the way, Dan, there's your, Dan was involved with this program for 17 years. And we figured the school teachers who took part in the 3 weeks of classes here at the School of Mines, and then Dan took them around all over the state to visit coal mines, aggregate mines, metal mines, all kinds of things. We figured the time that they go back to their classroom and educate their students that mining's not all this bad, that we just learned an awful lot. It was a fabulous program. That's a few years ago when they were at the Cross Mine at the Explosives magazine. One thing about explosives, nowadays, I used to buy explosives from Hendricks Hill in downtown Denver in the 70s. I would load up 1.5 tons of dynamite in the back of my pickup, 3,000 blasting caps, fuse, dead cord, and I'd drive to Boulder and I'd go have dinner. I had a tarp over this. I didn't have a license, and I didn't have to have a license to buy explosives. Today, after 9/11, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms has taken over the explosives, and I can tell you it is tough. When you get a license to buy explosives, you have 10 fingerprints, they check everything about your background, you can't have any convictions for anything, you can't have this or that, it takes some time to get it. But when you order dynamite, it has to be delivered by the distributor in a special truck, and they make you sign 6 pages, single space of paper. It says you will not do this, you do this, but the toughest part is inventory. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms comes up every year, whether we're active or not, and say right now we have 10 cases of powder, we have 6,000 blasting caps, and 3,000 feet of fuse, and 400 feet of dead cord, and all this. And those agents come up with their guns and their badges, and they look at our inventory from the previous year. And they sit there for hours and count every blasting cap, every stick of powder, and I'll tell you, if one of them's missing, you're in big trouble. So we're getting ready to do that next week for our annual inspection. But anyway, that's a little bit of Dan's program there. That was a wonderful, wonderful program. Property positions, when we do a financing, we have to be able to go to the financial people and say, this is our property position. You can see here that almost all these claims we've had the corners resurveyed, whether they're patented or unpatented. You can see the Cross Mine, the Idaho Tunnel that goes in 4,000 feet, the Caribou workings, and you can see the overlay of our claims. Land position is terribly important. Equipment, whether it's used or new, I've been looking at some mining equipment up in Quebec, Canada. One thing at the Cross Mine that's fascinating is that we have only mined from here up, and as these veins go down, they form a big trunk zone. And some of these veins never made it up past about 400 feet below the 4th level. But we're learning all this by core drilling. Rich said, Tom, you need a front-end loader. We'll put up a little bit of money, but we don't have enough to buy a new one with, but go to Ritchie Brothers auction in Denver in December. And I went there and found a loader for the exact amount of budget that Rich allowed. And by golly, it turned out to be a wonderful machine. It's 1999 vintage, but I love it. It runs perfect. And apart from having to change a flat tire in the dead of winter by myself a couple weeks ago, it's been a wonderful machine. So in small mining, we can't go out and buy a brand new Komatsu or a brand new Cat or whatever. So we have to utilize equipment like that. This is pond number 2 at the Cross Mine, and we're bringing the Caribou Hill water in here along with the Cross Mine water. After it's being limed here, it meets the Caribou water, which has a natural pH of 8, almost no metal level. And then we form a film of lime in here that lasts for 24 hours, and it discharges into the little creek. And that's where it takes 7 days a week of maintenance of that system. You can see pond number 1 and how green that water is from liming. Some of the Caribou crew that was involved with the 1950s uranium attempt, some very famous people in that picture. Again, some of the drilling we've done at the Cross Mine that shows the new veins that we've uncovered. early day Caribou. This is what it looked like in the 1870s up on Caribou Hill. And I'll never figure out when they take these pictures in all these old mining towns that the women and children are always have these beautiful dresses on. I don't know how they were able to do that in those days, but this is starting to sink a shaft on the Belcher claim about 1876. Those boilers at the Caribou mine use 4 cords of firewood a day. And you can see the wood back there. There's some of the crew at the Caribou mine. Again, land position. We've done an awful lot of work with SRK engineers. This is something that's fascinating, is that here's the cross mine, the Caribou mine, and that pink black line is the outline of the contact between the old Precambrian gneiss, which is 1.7 billion years old, and the monzonite, which is 62 million years old. This is a tertiary monzonite. This goes for 2 miles. This goes for 4 miles and all the way up to Jamestown and down to Idaho Springs. But you see, whenever this thing makes a curve, we're finding a gold stockwork in those curves. Now, when I was talking about those strike slip faults, northeast, southwest, the Anaconda, No Name, Caribou Park, Pomeroy Mountain, Rich asked me an interesting question the other day about those faults. And now we found that those veins that are in the Precambrian go right into the monzonite. So what age are those faults and how they affected those veins and emplacement of ore? But we're also finding as you're mining down a vein, you'll have faulting, you'll have post-mineral faulting. It's not, if you always see slicking sides on the footwall and hanging wall, but we're seeing them perpendicular to the hanging wall and footwall, which is quite intriguing. Post-mineral faulting. School kids, we've had over 40,000 kids visit the mine. And in the old days, one of my things was doing a dynamite explosion. And I used to do it for dance group. And I did that to teach kids about finding blasting caps or explosives on a construction site or a home building or a shopping center, and not to touch them, to report them. Because every year in America, about 10 kids lose their fingers or they go blind by picking up a blasting cap and hitting with a hammer. So I would educate the kids about the dangers of finding explosives. Well, in addition to that, I showed them how our explosives work. And the student who would answer the toughest question I asked, I got to light the fuse. And we would have a half a stick of powder and we'd blow something up, a computer, a old clock or a boot or whatever. And so I'm giving a lecture down at Women in Mining's Industry Appreciation Night in Denver one night. There's about 200 people in the crowd, and I'm talking about this dynamite explosion where we used to take the lit fuse, which would take 10 minutes to go off, and we'd throw it over the hill, and one of them wrapped around our phone wire right in front of the mine. And we had 12 cars parked there. We had minutes to move those cars, get everybody in safe, and then so who's sitting in the audience at Women in Mining? John Petty, who was head of District 8 MSHA. And after my talk, he said, "Tom, I need to have a talk with you." So we went into the men's restroom, and he looked me in the eye about this far away, and he said, "Tom, if I ever hear of you doing a dynamite exhibition for school kids particularly, we're going to pull your licenses away." So I had to stop doing it. Dan remembers those very well. More kids. Again, I used to put them in the loader bucket and raise them up and down like a carnival ride. All these kids went into the mine. From the aerial view, you can see this is where we're at. This is where the old town of Caribou existed for 40 years. There were 800 people living there. This is the cross mine, Caribou, Idaho tunnel level that goes in 6,000 feet total, but this is Caribou Hill, the Comstock mine, Goat Hill, Idaho Hill. And one of the unique features of modern technology, and Rich is bringing in a new company, but we did a Aerodat geophysical survey where they did uranium, thorium, magnetic lows and magnetic highs. one thing we find is the magnetic flows often are where we're finding these big ore zones. They show up as deep blue on these, and again, this is all in the Vulcan program. Rich is working with some technology that has the ability to penetrate data that can be used to determine new veins and veins that can go down to significant depth. This fellow right here was instrumental in the early 1870s to develop the Caribou mine. That tea set was built from Caribou silver. I've spent 45 years trying to find out where that thing is. He sold the mine to a Dutch group, and they moved people into Netherlands in 1873. Because Netherlands is a lowland, they named it Netherlands. It used to be called Brown's Place because of what you would find in the Netherlands. And the mine sold to a group for $3 million. It was the first silver mine in Colorado to sell for a multi-million-dollar figure. Following that, Robert Dunn, who founded Dunn and Bradstreet, New York, took over the Caribou mine, and he had it for 25 years. And Chester A. Arthur was his attorney, who helped fight some of the apex and land issues, and he went on to become president of the United States. Those pictures, that's about all I brought today, but one thing that I've learned, well, a couple lessons I've learned. Make everything you do that's tough a challenge, and you'll get over it, no matter how bad it is. Don't ever give up on it. If you're looking for partners in mining, do a lot of research. Today you have the internet. You can go on the internet and find out millions of things about everybody you're dealing with. The MSHA, we have operated for the last 11 years without one citation. And that's whether we've got 10 people working or myself working. And the key to MSHA is not only your 40-hour training and 8-hour refresher, but keep meticulous books. We have in our shelves in the mine office 11 books: surface inspection, equipment inspection, ventilation, air quality. Every time we go in the mine, we have to do our ribs, back, floor samples, and write them in a log, paperwork, training. So when that MSHA inspector comes up and he starts looking at plugs on extension cords and weighing your sub-rescuers and saying, hey, who's this guy right here? Does he have his training? And he pulls out his pink sheet. Yes, he does. And he sees how we train. We spend an hour every Monday morning training, and we can do the 40-hour training at the mine. Usually we do the 8-hour refresher up at the Edgar mine. That's a critical thing. Air monitoring, we have a permit with the state of Colorado and Boulder County for air. Division of Minerals Reclamation and Mining, that's our main reclamation permit. They're very fair people, they're pro-mining, but you don't want to get on the wrong side of those people. Any of these agencies, ATF, MSHA. Now what about Boulder County? People say, Tom, you can't operate a mine in Boulder County. And I say, wait a minute. We went for an expansion permit in 2008. In 2008. We worked with Walsh environmental scientists and engineers, and we did a massive amount of work, and we went to the Boulder County Commissioners and applied for an expansion permit from 2 acres to 9.6 acres and to build our new mine and mill. It was a public hearing. The Planning Commission had 2 public hearings. It was published in the Boulder papers, and we went to the meetings. I gave my presentations. There was not one person in that audience that opposed our mining expansion, and they gave us approval. We went to the Boulder County Commissioners, 3 public hearings. Nobody stood up and opposed us. And part of that is educating, working with our local community, and working with the Boulder County government. Now, some people say, well, when I go north to Fort Collins, I don't go through Boulder County. I don't want to contaminate myself with the weirdos that live up there. But I can tell you, Boulder County is a pure mining community 80 years ago. It had 400 mills, hundreds of mines, mining, ranching, and so forth. And yes, there's some weirdos. And yes, there's some funny things that go on in Boulder. But for the most part, if you do it right, they're going to support you. We had one of the most liberal Democratic commissioners who's still head of the county commissioner, Cindy Dominicio, I've known for 35 years, write a front page article in the Boulder Camera that gold mining's going to be rejuvenated and brought back at Caribou. And it's educating, it's talking to them, it's bringing them up to the line. But I can tell you, since we're at Caribou and our water goes into Barker Reservoir in Nederland, and that's now owned by the City of Boulder Water Department, we have one shot to do it right, no more. When we build our new mill and we filter cake and make a Portland cement paste and put it underground, and we have recycling going on, we have one shot to make that work 24/7. If it screws up and goes down into Barker Reservoir and Boulder Water System, that will be the fatal blow to us in every area. And so that involves line of sight, buildings, noise, water, no spillage, spill prevention, the use of chemicals that we use. One shot, I guarantee you. And I think we figured out a way to do it. It's going to be more expensive. Now, how does a small miner do all this? Well, I've been lucky enough to start with nothing and find something. And when you find something and you put it together right, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we've had offers from Cypress Copper Corporation when they were in existence, Placer Dome Mining. We had Heckle Mining down and made us an offer. We had a merger in place with Canyon Resources, Resource Capital Fund. We've had many major groups that have come in and tried to do a deal with us on Caribou. Many of them we've turned down. And then we've had some crooks and scoundrels, as Rich knows. We had a very prominent man here in Colorado that came in our back door and tried to steal everything from us. And we had to fight him in Denver court and in Boulder. It was a $3 million lawsuit. And these idiots came to me and said, Tom, if you don't join our team, you're going to be a street person in Boulder with a cardboard sign that said, I need money for food. And I looked these stupid fools in the face and I said, I would rather stand on the corner in Boulder with a cardboard sign with my miner helmet on and say that my life's career has been stolen by a bunch of low-life crooks here in Colorado than to work for you. We're just now, we settled that in 2014. We're settling some other matters. We're 99% there. And that's gonna finally put us over the hill. So Rich has brought in some people that are wonderful, they're honest, they're a great group of people, and we believe that by this summer we're gonna step by step be starting to build the new mine, the mill. We're gonna continue core drilling. We just finished last week a new NI 43101 study by Hard Rock Consultants. Their offices are down here in Lakewood, and it's a wonderful 125-page testimonial on everything from land to legal to resources to everything. And so stair step by stair step, I think we're there. Now, who are we going to use to hire to work up there? Well, hopefully some of you. We hope. We've had a number of students from, even Melton Ward, who was chairman of the board of Cypress Copper, his son worked for me. Quentin Henning, who got his doctorate of ore deposits here at School of Mines, worked for me when he was 16 and got gold fever and came here to mines, and he worked for Homestake Newmont. Many of the majors, he put his own public company together, and today he has Novo Resources, which has a beautiful gold, high-grade gold deposit in northwest Australia. He lives in Longmont, Colorado. So we've had a lot of wonderful kids come out of, not kids, students, grown-ups from University of Colorado, from School of Mines, from other schools here in the state. And this is a district that's going to be around for a long, long time. I think Thomas will be an old man when we're just starting to get to the top of the main ore body. So I don't know if I can convince my wife to let Thomas be a miner, but I'm doing everything I can to educate him at a young age. So I brought a few rocks and minerals in. Really, how we go from ore to